There's a version of trauma we recognize immediately: the shaking hands, the panic attack, the person who cannot get out of bed, the person who falls apart. And then there's another person. She gets up, she makes the coffee, she answers the phone, she goes to work, she buys the groceries, she remembers everybody's birthday. She feeds the dog, she makes dinner. She laughs when somebody says something funny. And if you ask the people around her how she was doing, they might tell you she's strong. She's handling it. She's doing remarkably well. But ask her. Really ask her. And she may tell you something very different. She may say, I don't know. I don't really feel anything. I know I love people. I just can't seem to feel the love. I know something should make me happy. It doesn't. Terrible things are happening, and I know I should probably be devastated, but I'm not crying. I'm not screaming. I'm not collapsing. I'm just here, moving through the day, doing what needs to be done, watching myself live a life I no longer seem entirely inside. Online, this experience is increasingly called functional freeze. And the phrase has struck a nerve because it describes something millions of people recognize. I am functioning, but I do not feel alive. There is something important we need to clear up, though. Functional freeze is not a formal psychiatric diagnosis. And the science of trauma is much more complicated than the phrase makes it sound. The human nervous system has several defensive responses to threat. Fight and flight are the ones almost everybody knows. But researchers also describe freezing, an involuntary defensive state in which movement can decrease while the nervous system assesses threat. And under extreme, inescapable threat, humans can experience something called tonic immobility, profound, involuntary inhibition of movement and sometimes speech. That is not weakness. It is not consent. It is not a person deciding to do nothing. It is an automatic defensive response. But that acute biological response is not exactly the same thing as going to work for 6 months while feeling emotionally dead inside. That longer experience may involve something else trauma researchers know very well: numbing, detachment, avoidance, dissociation. Sometimes depersonalization, the strange feeling that you are observing yourself from outside yourself. Sometimes derealization, the feeling that the world around you isn't entirely real. Sometimes an emotional shutdown that is harder to name. And this is where ordinary language and clinical language collide. People say, I froze. What they mean is, I stopped feeling. I stopped wanting. I stopped reaching. I stopped expecting anything. I narrowed my life down to what absolutely had to be done. And because I continued doing those things, nobody understood how far away I had gone. That distinction matters because functioning and healing are not the same thing. We confuse them constantly. She hasn't missed work, so she must be okay. She keeps the house clean. She must be coping. She's still taking care of everybody. She's incredibly resilient. Maybe. But completing tasks tells us what a person can still do. It does not necessarily tell us what she can still feel. Sometimes routine is genuinely stabilizing. Sometimes work gives structure. Sometimes caring for other people gives us purpose. And sometimes those same things allow a deeply distressed human being to remain almost invisible. Because we have built a culture that knows how to recognize suffering when it becomes inconvenient. We notice when somebody cannot perform anymore. We are much worse at noticing the person who continues performing while disappearing inside the performance. And women can become especially good at this, not because women possess some special trauma response, but because so many women have spent their lives learning that other people's needs do not stop simply because they are hurting. Children still need breakfast. Parents still need care. Customers still call. Bills still arrive. Laundry continues multiplying with almost supernatural determination. So she keeps moving, and eventually everybody, including her, may begin using her continued movement as evidence that she is fine. But inside, life can become strangely flat. Music doesn't land. Food is just food. Sex feels impossibly far away. People tell you wonderful news, and you know intellectually that you're happy for them. You perform the appropriate reaction, but somewhere underneath it you wonder, why can't I feel this? You may stop imagining the future. You may stop initiating plans. You may spend enormous amounts of time scrolling, staring, sleeping, working, organizing, or doing whatever allows the hours to pass without requiring very much emotional presence. And then comes another layer of suffering. You start judging yourself for it. What's wrong with me? Why don't I care? Why am I so lazy? Why can't I get excited? Why don't I miss people the way I used to? Why do I want everyone to leave me alone? Why do I feel guilty when someone needs something from me? Why am I exhausted when I haven't done anything? Those questions deserve curiosity before condemnation, because numbness can appear after overwhelming experiences. Detachment can occur in trauma. Dissociative symptoms can occur in PTSD. And chronic or repeated trauma can affect emotion regulation and relationships in profound ways. But there is another reason we need to be careful with the word trauma. Not every period of exhaustion is a trauma response. Not every episode of numbness means PTSD. Depression can produce emotional blunting. Grief can. Burnout can. Certain medications can. Physical illness can. Sleep deprivation can. Hormonal and neurological conditions can. And sometimes a person is simply overwhelmed. A 30-second social media video cannot diagnose the reason you feel absent from your own life. Neither can this episode, but it can give you a question worth asking. When did I stop feeling present? Not what's wrong with me. When? What was happening? What had I been carrying? What did I have to survive? What could I not safely express? What happened just before the world became gray? And perhaps the most important question, what does my system believe would happen if I started feeling all of it again? Because sometimes numbness is not emptiness. Sometimes it is protection. That does not mean we romanticize it. A survival response can save us in one context and become painful when it continues long after the danger has changed. Healing is not forcing yourself to feel everything at once. It is not ripping open every memory. It is not sitting alone and deliberately overwhelming yourself because someone online told you trauma lives in your hips. Evidence-based treatment for PTSD exists. Trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapies and EMDR are among the treatments recommended in major clinical guidelines. And when significant dissociation is part of the picture, assessment matters because treatment sometimes needs to account for depersonalization, derealization, emotional regulation, and the person's ability to remain present during trauma work. There is no prize for doing this alone. And recovery is not measured by how quickly you become cheerful again. Sometimes the earliest signs of return are tiny. You notice that the coffee tastes good. A song makes you cry. You become irritated by something you've been tolerating for months. You want to go somewhere. You miss somebody. You laugh without planning to. You realize you're angry. And strangely enough, even anger can feel like good news after numbness. Because something is moving again. Something is reaching the surface. Something in you is saying, I am still here. That is what I want the woman listening to this to understand. If you have continued functioning while feeling increasingly absent from your own life, your ability to keep going does not automatically mean you are unaffected. Sometimes survival is spectacular. Sometimes it looks like somebody crawling from wreckage. And sometimes survival is almost invisible. It looks like a woman standing at the sink washing a plate, answering an email, folding a towel, going to work, doing everything she has always done, except she is no longer entirely there. The world looks at her and says, look how strong she is. And perhaps she was strong, but perhaps strength was never the whole story. Maybe she did not survive by falling apart. Maybe she survived by becoming very still, somewhere nobody could see. And healing begins not when she performs life more efficiently, but when, little by little, she begins to inhabit it again. Functioning and healing are not the same thing. And being able to carry on was never proof that nothing happened to you.